It's no longer a threat. It is no longer a warning. It is a reality that has shattered the fragile peace of the Western Hemisphere. Moments ago, the first shots of a full-scale war between the United States and Venezuela were fired in the Caribbean Sea. The USS Halsey, a cutting-edge Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, has been critically struck by a Venezuelan anti-ship missile in what the Pentagon is now unequivocally calling a barbaric and unprovoked act of war. The American response was not just instantaneous but devastatingly precise, unleashing a torrent of retaliatory fire that has plunged the region into an unprecedented conflict. The Caribbean is no longer a tranquil expanse of blue. It is a combat zone, a cauldron of geopolitical fury. This is not a drill. This is not a diplomatic crisis that can be resolved with carefully worded statements. This is total war, a horrifying escalation that has pushed the world to the precipice of an abyss from which there may be no return. Every capital, every stock market, every military command center across the globe is now fixated on this unfolding catastrophe. What began as a tense, decades-long standoff, punctuated by proxy skirmishes and fiery rhetoric, has, in the last hour, erupted into open warfare, transforming the turquoise waters of the Caribbean into a graveyard of steel, fire, and shattered illusions. In an emergency, globally televised address from the Oval Office, the President of the United States, his face grim and resolute, declared that a state of war now exists between the United States and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. He announced the immediate imposition of a full maritime and aerial blockade of Venezuela, effectively isolating the nation from the world. The legendary U.S. Fourth Fleet, reactivated for this very purpose and augmented by an array of NATO and allied naval assets, has been given explicit authorization to engage and destroy any and all hostile targets within the newly designated Caribbean Combat Zone. This mandate extends to any vessel or aircraft attempting to breach the blockade, signaling an uncompromising stance that leaves no room for misinterpretation. Simultaneously, in Caracas, Nicolas Maduro, flanked by his top military commanders and draped in the Venezuelan flag, delivered a defiant, impassioned broadcast on national television. He declared a state of national resistance, accusing the United States of a cowardly, genocidal imperialist attack, and rallying the Venezuelan people to defend the sacred soil of the fatherland to the last drop of blood against the Yankee aggressor. He confirmed the activation of all military reserves, the deployment of asymmetrical defense units throughout the country, and the full mobilization of Venezuela's advanced air defense systems. The world is now facing a horrifying reality. A hot war has begun in America's backyard, a conflict that threatens to redraw the geopolitical map of the Western Hemisphere. The first terrifying moves on this global chessboard have already been made, and the consequences are unfathomable. This in-depth analysis will take you inside the heart of the conflict, moment by moment. We will dissect the precise incident that lit the fuse, analyze the terrifying military power being unleashed by both sides, and explore the catastrophic scenarios that could now unfold, potentially dragging the entire world into the flames of a wider conflagration. Prepare yourself. The war for the Western Hemisphere has begun, and its echoes will reverberate across continents. The total war that now engulfs the Caribbean, transforming it from a tourist paradise into a theater of conflict, was ignited by a single brutal incident in the historically disputed waters of the Gulf of Venezuela. According to initial frantic and now confirmed reports from the Pentagon, the USS Halsey, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, was conducting what it termed routine freedom of navigation operations near the Los Monges archipelago. These small barren islands, strategically located at the entrance to the Gulf, have long been a flashpoint, with Venezuelan authorities vehemently claiming these waters as their sovereign territory, a claim the U.S. has consistently refused to recognize, viewing it as an infringement on international maritime law. At approximately 0400 hours local time, under the cloak of pre-dawn darkness, the Halsey was approached by not one, but two Venezuelan Vosper-class fast attack craft, the Federación and the Independencia, operating with aggressive intent, What followed was a rapid, fatal, and irreversible escalation. The Pentagon alleges that after issuing a standard challenge via radio, which was met with defiant silence, one of the Venezuelan vessels, the Federación, launched a sea-skimming automat anti-ship missile. The missile, a potent weapon Venezuela acquired years ago from Italy, designed for coastal defense and naval interdiction, struck the USS Halsey on its port side, amidships. The impact ripped a gaping hole in the destroyer's hull, triggering secondary explosions and an immediate, raging fire. Initial reports indicate significant structural damage and an unknown, but presumed high number of casualties, including both dead and wounded American sailors. The sight of the proud U.S. warship listing, engulfed in smoke and flames, sent a chilling message across the world. But the American response was not just immediate, it was overwhelming and merciless. Before the second Venezuelan vessel, the Independencia, could react or launch its own ordnance, a volley of missiles, including a Standard Missile-2 from the Halsey itself and precision-guided munitions from an overhead P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, obliterated both Venezuelan ships. Debris and burning wreckage rained down on the waves, leaving no survivors. The engagement lasted less than 5 minutes, but its repercussions would be felt for decades. Within minutes of the Halsey incident, the situation spiraled catastrophically out of control. The U.S. Southern Command in Doral, Florida, was elevated to DEFCON 1, the highest possible state of alert, signifying that war was not just imminent, but actively underway. The USS George Washington Carrier Strike Group, a colossal floating city of air power and naval might which was on maneuvers in the mid-Atlantic, was ordered to proceed at flank speed towards the Caribbean, its FA-18 Super Hornets already being armed for combat. Simultaneously, flights of F-22 Raptors, the world's most advanced stealth fighters, and B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, capable of delivering massive payloads, were scrambled from bases across the continental United States. Their targets: key military, installations, naval bases, and airfields deep within Venezuelan territory. In a chilling televised statement that echoed across a stunned nation, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, declared, "An unprovoked attack on a United States naval vessel is an attack on the United States of America. Let there be no doubt. Those responsible will be held accountable. The process of holding them accountable has already begun, and it will be swift, decisive, and overwhelming." The Caribbean was no longer a region of mere tension. It was now a live-fire war zone, and the world braced for the inevitable. The outbreak of total war between the United States and Venezuela has sent seismic shockwaves across the globe, forcing nations to scramble and react to a terrifying new reality that threatens to unravel the delicate fabric of international relations. The United Nations Security Council was immediately called into an emergency, closed-door session. But with the U.S. and Venezuela trading furious accusations of aggression and war crimes, a diplomatic solution appears not just distant, but utterly impossible. The rhetoric from both sides has poisoned any chance of immediate de-escalation. Russia and China, Venezuela's most powerful strategic allies and long-standing adversaries of the United States, were among the first to react, their responses a mix of outrage and thinly veiled opportunism. The Russian Foreign Ministry issued a scathing, fiery condemnation of what it termed naked American aggression and a flagrant violation of international law and sovereign borders. In a move that sent shivers down the spines of Western intelligence agencies, Moscow announced that its own naval assets in the region, including the advanced frigate Admiral Gorshkov, which had been on a highly publicized goodwill visit to Cuba, were being placed on the highest state of combat readiness. The stated purpose: to ensure the safety of international shipping and prevent further reckless escalation by the United States. This declaration was widely interpreted as a direct challenge to the newly imposed U.S. blockade. Beijing's response was equally forceful, though initially more measured in tone. A spokesperson for the Chinese Ministry of National Defense declared that China was gravely concerned by the unilateral military actions of the United States and demanded an immediate cessation of hostilities, calling for restraint from all parties. However, Unconfirmed but highly credible reports from maritime intelligence agencies and satellite surveillance suggest that a Chinese naval task force, centered around the formidable Type 075 amphibious assault ship Hainan, and accompanied by several Type 055 destroyers, has abruptly altered its course in the Atlantic. Instead of returning to the Pacific, it is now steaming at high speed towards the Caribbean, a move that could dramatically and dangerously complicate the strategic picture for the U.S. Navy, introducing a third formidable player into an already volatile equation. Latin America, caught in the crossfire of this escalating superpower confrontation, is now deeply fractured. Nations like Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina, traditional U.S. allies, have expressed deep concern and issued urgent calls for de-escalation and a return to diplomacy. However, they have also almost reflexively placed their own border forces on high alert, fearing a spillover of the conflict. Meanwhile, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia, longtime ideological partners of Venezuela, have issued statements of unconditional solidarity with the Maduro regime, vehemently condemning the United States and calling for a united regional front against Yankee imperialism. The Caribbean, once a symbol of tropical tranquility, has rapidly become a geopolitical powder keg, and the world watches in horror as the great powers begin to choose sides, their decisions potentially sealing the fate of millions. The declaration of the Caribbean as a combat zone has had immediate, profound, and catastrophic consequences that extend far beyond the immediate theater of war. The Federal Aviation Administration and the International Maritime Organization have issued unprecedented emergency notices, rerouting all civilian air and sea traffic away from a vast, rapidly expanding exclusion zone. This zone now covers the entire southern Caribbean, stretching from the coast of Colombia, across the Venezuelan coastline, and extending eastward to encompass the Lesser Antilles. The region's vibrant tourism-dependent economies, from Aruba to Barbados, have collapsed overnight, their pristine beaches and luxury resorts now desolate, their skies empty of commercial flights, and their harbors devoid of cruise ships. The economic fallout is immediate and devastating. Global financial markets have reacted with panic. Oil prices have skyrocketed on global markets, with Brent crude jumping over 30% in a matter of hours, reaching levels not seen in decades. This surge is fueled by acute fears of a complete disruption to Venezuelan oil exports, a critical supply for some nations, and, more broadly, the security of major shipping lanes through the Panama Canal and the vital sea routes that connect the Americas. The specter of global recession, if not depression, now looms large. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy has begun to enforce the blockade with terrifying efficiency and overwhelming force. Reports are emerging from intelligence sources of U.S. Virginia-class nuclear-powered attack submarines, the silent hunters of the deep, enforcing a choke point strategy. These stealthy predators are positioned at key passages and straits, effectively blocking any vessel from entering or leaving Venezuelan waters. The U.S. Coast Guard, now operating under direct Navy command, has been given expanded authority to board and seize any vessel suspected of attempting to breach the blockade, leading to tense standoffs and, in some cases, violent confrontations at sea. The fog of war is rapidly descending, obscuring the truth and amplifying the chaos. Both Washington and Caracas have unleashed a torrent of propaganda, each side seeking to control the narrative and demonize the other. U.S. networks show dramatic, continuous footage of the damaged USS Halsey and interviews with grieving families, while Venezuelan state television endlessly repeats images of what it claims are civilian areas hit by cowardly American bombs and impassioned speeches from Maduro. Getting accurate, verifiable information has become nearly impossible, as independent journalists are expelled or suppressed. The Caribbean is no longer a collection of sovereign nations. It is a battleground, a massive, deadly chessboard where the stakes are nothing less than global dominance and the lives of millions. The world holds its breath, gripped by a chilling sense of dread, as military strategists, political leaders, and ordinary citizens alike contemplate the terrifying possibilities of what comes next. The path of escalation is not merely a slippery slope. It is a precipice, with each step leading closer to a global catastrophe that could redefine human civilization. The initial incident was just the spark. The inferno now threatens to consume everything. The United States, seeking a swift, decisive end to the conflict and to minimize its own casualties, launches a massive, coordinated air and special operations campaign aimed at decapitating the Venezuelan leadership. The goal is clear: remove Maduro and his inner circle, shatter the command and control of the Venezuelan military, and force a rapid, unconditional surrender. Precision airstrikes target presidential palaces, military headquarters, and communication nodes. Special forces teams are inserted to capture or neutralize key figures. But this is a high-risk, high-stakes gamble. If Maduro is not captured or killed, he could escape, becoming a powerful symbol of resistance and a martyr for his cause. The U.S. could then find itself inexorably bogged down in a brutal, protracted urban guerrilla war in the dense labyrinthine streets of Caracas, a nightmare scenario reminiscent of past conflicts with no easy exit, draining American blood and treasure for years. Russia and China, while carefully avoiding direct military confrontation with the United States to prevent a nuclear exchange, decide to turn Venezuela into an unmanageable quagmire for the United States. They flood the country with a torrent of advanced weaponry, sophisticated S-400 anti-aircraft missile systems, next-generation Zircon hypersonic anti-ship missiles, state-of-the-art cyber warfare units, and thousands of highly trained military advisors and special forces operatives disguised as contractors. Venezuela effectively becomes a testing ground for the latest Russian and Chinese military technology against a formidable Western adversary. The U.S. military finds itself bleeding resources, equipment, and lives against a well-armed, highly motivated, and determined insurgency, covertly backed by two rival superpowers. The conflict drags on, becoming a proxy war of attrition that saps American resolve and prestige on the global stage. A convoy of Russian and Chinese humanitarian ships, heavily escorted by a formidable array of their own warships, including the Admiral Gorshkov and the Hainan Task Force, attempts a daring, provocative breach of the U.S. blockade. The President of the United States is faced with an unthinkable, agonizing choice: allow the blockade to be broken, thereby showing weakness, undermining American credibility, and allowing Venezuela to be resupplied, or give the terrifying order to fire on Russian and Chinese naval vessels. This is the moment that could trigger a direct, hot war between the world's three foremost nuclear powers, a 21st-century Cuban Missile Crisis, but with far more complex variables and less room for diplomatic maneuvering. The world holds its breath, knowing that a single miscalculation could lead to global devastation. The conflict, once confined to the Caribbean, spills violently beyond its borders. A desperate Venezuela, with covert assistance and sophisticated cyber tools from its allies, launches a devastating cyber attack on the U.S. power grid, its financial systems or critical infrastructure, plunging vast swathes of the country into chaos. Or, in a moment of extreme tension and miscommunication, a Russian or Chinese submarine operating with lethal stealth torpedoes a U.S. aircraft carrier or a key allied naval asset. This is the doomsday scenario, where the rules of engagement are abandoned, and the conflict escalates into a global, multi-front war, potentially involving conventional and even unconventional weapons. A direct military exchange between the United States, Russia, and China would not only collapse the global economy into an irreparable abyss, but would push humanity to the very brink of nuclear annihilation. The future of civilization hangs by the thinnest of threads. The first shots have been fired. The Caribbean is no longer a tranquil sea but a declared war zone. The total war promised in the headlines is no longer a hypothetical scenario. It is a terrifying, unfolding reality that has shattered global stability. The United States and Venezuela are locked in a death struggle, but the ominous shadows of Russia and China loom large, turning a regional conflict into a global crisis of unprecedented scale. The Monroe Doctrine, once a cornerstone of American foreign policy, has not just been challenged. It has been brutally shattered, its relevance questioned by the roar of cannons and the flash of missiles. The world as we knew it ended today, replaced by an era of profound uncertainty and peril. The choices made in the coming hours and days in Washington, Caracas, Moscow, and Beijing will not just determine the fate of millions, but potentially the very trajectory of human history. Will cooler heads against all odds prevail, or are we witnessing the terrifying dawn of a new and terrible world war, a conflict that could dwarf all others? The stakes have never been higher. The future has never been more uncertain, teetering precariously on a knife's edge. This is a developing story of monumental, existential importance. What do you believe is the correct course of action for the United States in this terrifying new reality? Is a full-scale invasion justified, or would it be a catastrophic mistake? What role should Russia and China play, and how should the world respond to their intervention? Share your urgent analysis, your fears, and your predictions in the comments below. Like this video, subscribe to our channel for continuous unfiltered updates, and click the notification bell to stay on the absolute front lines of this historic, unfolding crisis. Your voice matters now more than ever as the world descends into chaos.